The Republican Senate nominee is in the House.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Greetings, great to have you in. Bob Flanders is here. Always enjoyed having him when he wasn't a contender. Now he's a contender, and he surprised me on the radio the other day with his absolute position on this Kavanaugh drama going on in Washington. Haven't talked to him in 36 hours, so we'll see if anything has changed. But there's a lot of shuffling going on down in Washington right now ahead of Monday's potential hearing, sort of, on this. All right, but we've got all sorts of other things we want to get to as well. But we're going to start with a follow-up and a preview at the same time. We're following up on a North Smithfield story that I opined on last night and spent a good amount of time on the radio discussing over the last couple of days, and which will be the conversation with the ACLU tomorrow. Steve Brown, the executive director, will join us to talk about what North Smithfield's town council has done. But then, lo and behold, minutes before our broadcast taping time, which is in the early afternoon during the weekdays, this headline came in. North Smithfield Council President backs down on the call for a Nike boycott. That 3-2 vote by the town council is going to be, reportedly, is going to be rescinded, coming up on an emergency meeting on Monday. The town council president, John Beauregard, who is a former state trooper for 25 years, says he still feels very strongly about the matter, but that there's been too much backlash for the community. Well, you know, John, when you abuse your power and you don't, and you're not actualized about what you've been elected for, sometimes it hits the fan. So regrouping is always a thing that the public enjoys. The public is there to forgive. So we'll see, and we'll talk about that next week. In the meantime, the dumbest political story of the year occurred yesterday, and guess what? Everybody took the bait, including my guest, and I'm going to rough him up a little bit. Not that he's rough up a little bit, but I'm going to rough him up a little bit on this one too, because you know what? Does anybody ever take a deep breath and say, Here's the headline. What's it say? Now I regret it. So this Gloucester guy who's a little excitable, he's definitely a WPRO Dan York listener, there's no doubt about that, because he called my show yesterday all upset about how he was misunderstood for his somewhat politically incorrect way of expressing himself with Alan Fung. Here's the story that Eyewitness News ran on this.
This display of signs on a lawn in Chepachet has local politicians shocked. In between a sign supporting Bob Flanders and Joe Trillo is an Alan Fung sign hung upside down from what appears to be a noose.
Rhode Islanders are better than that.
The Republican candidate for governor addressed the sign situation at his campaign headquarters Tuesday.
This hateful symbol, which many of us have hopefully long forgotten, is reappearing in this campaign.
His opponents in the governor's race also respond. Independent candidate Joe Trillo says he only learned of the sign this morning, but believes the owner of the sign did not have any hateful intentions. The resident actually stopped in to speak with Trillo this afternoon.
But after talking to him, I'm really convinced that it was his way of expressing something in a politically incorrect way.
There is no place for that in politics, in a civil discourse. I think it's awful, and we just can't condone that kind of behavior.
The Flanders for U.S. Senate campaign tells Eyewitness News they have asked for their signs to be taken down and returned from the property.
Okay, listen, no place for what, Governor? As soon as I saw this picture yesterday, without having to talk to anybody, I said, well, that's clumsy. I'd never thought about a hate crime. I bet you this guy is PO'd at Alan Fung and found a rope that might have been, turns out that's what it is. This guy is upset that Alan Fung didn't debate. It's not, and by the way, no one has connected whatever dot is supposed to be connected here between the noose, the rope, and the upside down sign. I actually was thinking, okay, is this a lynching thing? So I actually looked up Chinese Americans, because he's Asian. In 1874 in Los Angeles, there was a Chinese massacre where 3 Chinese Americans were hung after they were killed. I figured maybe Fung was going to pull that out of his wazoo when he calls his first press conference in the gubernatorial race for this silly thing. But he couldn't even spit out what it was that bothered him about it, other than you saw, there's no place in... Here's the guy explaining that he went around apologizing to everybody because he didn't have a thought about that.
What happened when you swung by the Fung campaign? Did you speak to anybody of stature there?
I just spoke to their campaign managers. There were like 9 people in the room there, and I told them, I apologized to each and every one of them. It wasn't my intent, and they told me that they can see that I'm a sincere person.
We have such hair triggers these days. Nobody wants to think through it. Everybody wants to be the first one to say, oh, even you said take my signs down.
Well, I didn't want to be associated with the symbolism of a noose, which in our history, as you know, with lynchings and the incident you mentioned with the Chinese in the late 1800s, it's a symbol that's fraught with racism and all of that.
The guy is clumsy. He tells me he turned the sign over. It wasn't standing up, so he went for this rope. Now, if he doesn't look at it and say, ooh, I get it. It's like, that's not good. He should have understood that this could be misinterpreted. Right. But a big-time campaign, if it was your, I would hope, it's hypothetical, but a big-time campaign looks at that and says, I'm not investing in this. And maybe sends a representative over to ask the guy what's going on. Instead, it becomes a federal case. We're sitting on the edge of our seats all too much, don't you think?
In some instances, but again, the symbolism of the noose is so fraught with peril to minorities that I think in this case the reaction was justified. I humbly disagree with you about it. I'm so glad that it turned out that this fellow responded the way he did. I think it was a terrible error of judgment on his part, but I think none of us want to be associated with that. I certainly don't, and that's the reason why I reacted the way I did.
Yeah, and your reaction was to have him return the signs,
yeah.
or you asked him to take the sign,
yeah.
Your signs down. Well, now that you know what his intent was and what his apology is, you all right with him supporting you?
Absolutely.
Put the signs back up, right?
No, I think he's apologized. If he wants to put the signs back up without that symbolism, you know, I'd be fine with that. I just didn't want my signs sitting next to a noose, or much less an effigy of someone being hung.
Yeah.
I mean, who would want that, Dan?
I understand that, but I have to tell you, Bob, the first moment I looked at it, I went, well, that's clumsy, because I couldn't put the connection together.
You're too kind.
Really,
you're too kind.
Huh?
I think you're way too kind about that. I mean,
well
it's
not Monday. I'm not Monday morning quarterbacking. The minute I saw it, I went, oh, that's silly, as opposed to, oh my gosh. I mean, who does that? And if one person does it, this is the thing. Fung's talking about the campaign. There's no place in the campaign. Well, the only people who have a place in the campaign are those who are involved in the campaign. This is a citizen out in Chepachet, who, by the way, had the thing on his lawn for a week before somebody said something.
It shouldn't have been there for a day, obviously.
Yeah. All right. Well, you know what? I am starving for authentic issues and authentic campaigning. Maybe that's why I take the position that I do. In the meantime, let's get to some serious stuff with the candidate. We got a lot of running room when we come back. Stay with us. All right, so here's one of the latest headlines on this Brett Kavanaugh controversy right now with Dr. Ford. Of course, the president is opining about this, and of course he's got it wrong again, suggesting that the FBI does not want to investigate this case. The FBI needs to have a request from the White House to investigate this case, and the president would know the process from, you know, an upside-down Alan Fung sign, for crying out loud. But anyway, here's the latest, and I'm looking forward to talking to the judge about this.
The woman accusing Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh of sexual assault wants the FBI to investigate her claims before she testifies on Capitol Hill. The Senate Judiciary Committee has invited both of them to speak separately on Monday. Dr. Christine Blasey Ford's attorney told CNN Ford wants to cooperate, but not before a full investigation.
There's no reason that we should have a public hearing on Monday, given what has occurred and when it has occurred. This is being rushed through, and it's too important to be rushed through. It's not a game.
Kavanaugh denies the allegations. Yesterday, President Trump stood by his nominee and rejected the idea of ordering the FBI to investigate.
Politically speaking, the senators will do a very good job. They really will. They're going to open it up.
Republicans said Monday will be Ford's only opportunity to testify. Kavanaugh is still expected to speak before the committee whether or not Ford shows up.
Yeah. And even before this latest rope-a-dope on the part of the accuser, and it kind of is a little bit of rope-a-dope, and I understand that she feels like she's under duress and that she thought this thing was going to be confidential, if you believe the script, right? I don't have any reason to not believe the script at this point, but still, it's a little bit of maybe too late. Even before that, when this thing was breaking, Senator Whitehouse came out in total support of her being heard, and you know, there was a tone that this thing is going to blow up, meaning the nomination. Bob Flanders, on the other hand, came out with a very strong, the headlines kind of reflect this, just came out a very, very strong statement that, you know, the horse is out of the barn and let's get going here. I'm paraphrasing. You still feel strongly that way, that this thing well, you know what? I'm not going to put words in your mouth. You can restate how you feel about it.
I think I feel the same way as I originally did, which is that I think that this development with her coming out three plus decades later with this accusation should not delay or derail the hearings. I've also said that if she wants to be heard, she should be heard, and they've given her this opportunity. And now, after a lawyer said she would be delighted at giving this opportunity, now they're backing away and putting conditions on it, saying they want an FBI investigation. And all of this is in the context of the Democrats trying to do everything they can possibly do to delay the hearing beyond the election. So the political stench, if you will, that's coming out of this is now becoming overwhelming. I didn't think these hearings would get any worse, but with this, the way this is all playing out, it's becoming even worse. So
I don't know how they could possibly delay this episode more than a couple of weeks, even with an FBI investigation. So I'm trying to figure out what the harm is here. It seems to me that, and I mean, and you're an expert on process. You know, you were one of our Supreme Court judges, and people should note that when they're going to the ballot box this November. It is protocol that when you have one of these kinds of situations that the Senate asks for an investigation so that they've got a working premise from which they can ask questions. Throwing her in cold, while it does feel like, you know, it's part of a delay game and all that kind of stuff, I still think is kind of a violation of the way the Senate does business anyway.
Well, first of all, I don't think this is within the purview of a normal FBI investigation. This kind of a charge would normally be investigated at the local level, state level, not by the FBI. When the FBI does a background check, they do what they do, but they don't go into the kind of investigation that she's calling for.
Yet the FBI would be involved in this on a background level if it had come up in July or August.
Not to the extent that she wants it, I don't believe. But in any event, what is an FBI investigation going to show about her credibility versus his credibility? I mean,
I don't know. So why not bother? I mean, so here's the question: if it is going to come down to a, you know, the old phrase, he said, she said, and he said, why not go through the whole protocols to make sure that you look like you've got every stone turned properly? I just wonder whether or not you're worried, aware, conscious of, concerned about, as a candidate, you looking like, you know, the middle-aged and more white Republican senators that will be, you know, interrogating here.
You know, I'd feel differently about this, Dan, if this was truly a Me Too situation where there were a raft of women making the similar charges as we had in the Weinstein and the Matt Lauer situations. What's different about this is a single isolated accusation that really is uncorroborated by the only person who was a witness to it, says it was nonsense, it didn't happen.
The same guy who wrote an entire book on entitled "Wasted," talking about the kind of alcohol that he and his buddies, including Kavanaugh, were swimming in during the high school years.
So, but the point is that, in a legal perspective, which is really where I come from, this kind of thing would never see the light of day. We have statutes of limitation. We don't let people testify about things like this that are decades old, where there's uncorroborated allegations of this sort. So. The question I have is, to what extent are we going to dig into the juvenile experiences of candidates for all these kinds of office? He called me such and such a name on the playground, and it's traumatized me for the rest of my life.
That's hardly what's been alleged here. She alleges rape by a 17-year-old.
She doesn't allege rape.
She's alleged rape.
No, she's alleged that
she thought he
attempted rape.
Right.
Well, that's a big difference there.
Gotcha.
Okay?
True.
I mean, so. Many people are skeptical of the fact that it's occurring in the context of a last-minute development in a highly politicized environment. Had she come out, within 10 years, within 15 years, maybe it would be a different situation. Where was she when he first became a judge? 12 years ago. Now that he's on the verge of being appointed to the Supreme Court.
Reportedly, she said nothing about it to anybody until 2012.
Well, that was 30 years down the road.
Well, you know what, Bob, I don't know what happened here.
Neither do I.
But I've learned enough about sexual assault victims to understand that they carry this pain for a long time.
I don't doubt it.
If in fact she exposed this conversation inside marital therapy sessions, one unnamed and then named 2012, and reportedly she wanted it to be known, but she didn't want to testify. Now she's been dragged in. It's ugly. It's an unwinnable situation, it seems, both ways. But your disposition, just so the voters know, your disposition would be the likes of what we've heard from the Lindsey Grahams of the world, to say, let's go.
Well, let her be heard if she wants to be heard, but let's not delay this thing already beyond what it's already been delayed. Let's get it over with. It's going to be a credibility battle in any event.
If it was more or less circumstantially proven, and that's the best you could do, something else comes up and it becomes circumstantially proven, is this enough of a problem to thwart the nomination and the vote?
Well, if it turns out that he was lying and knew about it, and that could be shown, if in fact he did what she's claiming and now he's denying it, yeah, I think that potentially and probably should be enough to torpedo the thing. But we're a long way from that.
Yeah. All right, when we come back, some issues. The Burville Power Plant is a contentious one, and we may have a good debate on that. Stay with us. Thanks. All right, hold on. I got a Flanders press release here that I the judge just threw at me here. Anyway, that's an issue that will be, I'm sure, a subject of debates that happen between Judge Flanders and Senator Whitehouse. You've come down against the Burville Power Plant.
Yes.
Remember, there's a siting committee, state siting committee, that has the jurisdiction over this.
Right.
Why are you weighing in, and what's your thought?
Well, one of the problems with the process for this is that the siting committee really doesn't have any representation from the local communities. I think 36 of 38 Rhode Island communities have come out against this because, like Burrillville, they're upset that they have really no say in this. And having ridden over the route that the water would have to be trekked in, the diesel fuel through a residential area, they got a water problem out there. So I'm against this on not because I'm not opposed to fossil fuel.
You're talking about two different water issues. There's the Pasco water supply, and then there's the idea that they got to truck water to the place.
Correct.
Which one bothers you?
The trucking.
The truck traffic on an old country road.
An old country road with residences, chock-a-block right by the road, with spillage and other issues.
Do you believe the Invenergy, and that's the company that's doing this, do you believe that this Invenergy project is unnecessary and unwarranted? Or you just don't like the locale?
I don't like the locale, and I don't believe it's warranted until we have greater pipeline capacity, because...
The same people who fight the plant fight the pipeline capacity.
I understand that, but to me those are two different issues. We don't have adequate pipeline capacity. I'm not against natural gas by any means, but we need greater pipeline capacity into the area, and building another plant in an area that I think is poorly sited is problematic when we don't have the pipeline capacity that we need, and probably the output of the plant would mostly be serving Massachusetts rather than ours.
So you're weighing in, but really it's just
site specific.
But it's kind of friend of the court. I mean, you've got no role here.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It's an important local project, but what I'm weighing in about is the fact that it's hypocritical of Senator Whitehouse, who's come out foursquare against fossil fuel production of all kinds in favor of renewables, to say, oh, well, in my own backyard, I'm going to turn a deaf eye and a deaf ear and a blind eye to this one, and basically give it a pass instead of coming out opposing it.
How's your debate thing going? I said, hey, during the break, and you threw me this press release. Have you guys formed up, or these are 10 issues?
What I'm proposing, Dan, is...
You're proposing 10 debates?
10 debates. We've got a lot of issues. They're all laid out there.
Not a chance.
But we need to debate.
You know how this game goes. Not a chance.
Well, you're sounding like the campaign manager of Sheldon Whitehouse.
No doubt. No doubt. I've been around too long. Well, you know, it's like the old kung fu thing. You ask for 10, you may get 4, you know?
I'll take whatever I can get, because we need to debate these issues, and I've already got one scheduled with them, but we need more. And so...
When is that scheduled, do you know?
I believe it's on your station
on 12.
12
I would think
October 8th.
I would think that 6, 10, 12 and WPRO radio will be at least the 4. I mean, that's been the staple behavior during these campaigns. Hopefully Sheldon doesn't play rope-a-dope with this whole thing, because you've got a strong enough candidacy here to make him pay for that.
I hope so.
Give me a half a minute on where you think this campaign is. I doubt this will be the last time I speak with you before the November election, that's for sure. But what's your objective view of where this thing is?
I think the view is that people out there are telling me there's a time for a change. They think we need, in effect, term limits. We need non-career politicians going down there. And everywhere I go, the message is, this guy's got to go. He hasn't done anything for us except pontificate about climate change. Where has he been in these 12 years? Where is he on health care, on jobs in the economy, on immigration reform? All these issues are crying out for people who are problem solvers to work with both sides and get it done. And he's a bomb thrower. So that's what I'm hearing out there, Dan.
All right.
In a nutshell.
Well, there you go. He wants 10 debates on 10 different issues, and I applaud the request. Sheldon, where do you stand? And get in here. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon, I'm sure. Bob Flanders, candidate for Senate, Republican. Final word next. By the way, Bob Flanders is asking for debate topics on prescription drugs and affordable health care, infrastructure, education, opioid crisis, immigration, foreign policy, environment and energy, jobs in the economy, judicial appointments, and government reform. All of which I think are worthy conversations. The likelihood that Sheldon Whitehouse will take on 10 debates is slim and none, and Slim just left town. However, I would think that he'll probably do 3. And I think 3 would be the minimum that he should do. Bob Flanders might have to make him pay if he doesn't. Never count your chickens. But I'm sure Sheldon will show up here. We'll talk about it soon. Tomorrow, we'll talk about that North Smithfield ACLU conversation. See ya.